Monday, so you're joined with me, Sarah Dallal, and I've got a brilliant guest with me today, Sam Mandy Gomi. How are you today?
I'm fine. It's the sun has been amazing up north today, so I'm on top of the world.
Oh wow, the sun shines up north. I didn't know that. No, I'm joking.
Oh,
Joking. Joking. I'm such a pompous southerner. No, I'm joking. But no, it's really good to have you. I'm very, very excited to get your insight today. And I hope everyone's doing okay too. So coming up on tonight's show, Democrats need to be bold. Tim Walz hitting some hard truths. Is it a two-tier system? We're going to look at the new sentencing guidelines criticised by Labour. And welcome to America, a place full of masked agents, no charges, and a Muslim student just vanishes. As always, please remember to like the stream. And if you're not a subscriber, please hit that button. We actually recently just hit 20K over the weekend, which is such an incredible milestone to reach. So thanks to all of you. I think it's been a truly um, yeah, I think we've got a really, really nice community here, a wonderful community. So super excited to see where this goes. Maybe the next goal will be 30K. I think that's what Curse is probably going to be calling for and everyone else. So see how it goes. And we'll also be getting to your comments at the end. So please make sure that you're busy in the chat. But on to our first story. Democratic Governor Tim Walz has come out this week to highlight the very obvious to the Democrats. If you do not fight for what you believe in, the far right will set the agenda by having the discussion on their terms. During a town hall in Rosenberg, Texas, Walz hit some pretty hard truths.
I'm just going to note this shit show of a text chain that was going on could have used a little diversity, equity, and inclusion in the people who were there. So I think, and I'm going to own this, when we see people back off and we see corporations back off to the threats, instead of leaning into and knowing we're doing this, because it's not only morally the right thing to do, it's economically the right thing to do, and our culture proves that our strength is our diversity. We've been talking about this for years as a country of immigrants, and we let them define the issue on immigration. We let them define the issue on DEI, and we let them define what woke is. We got ourselves in this mess because we weren't bold enough to stand up and say, you damn right we're proud of these policies.
I mean, it's a lesson that Keir Starmer has yet to learn on this side of the Atlantic. If you stand for nothing, you fall to everything. Starmer is losing votes to reform whilst the Dems are plummeting in the polls. Copying the right wing is not a strategy, it's simply letting them back you into a corner. And the right wing only reinforced this view with their coverage of Walz's speech with headlines such as these. Tim Walz hasn't learned any 2024 lessons, demands more wokeness, DEI, and illegal immigration. That was louder with Crowder. We also had Tim Walz diagnoses party's sad state. We aren't selling policies voters hate hard enough, the Daily Caller. Tampon, Tim Walz blames Trump's victory on Democrats not being woke enough. According to Walz, Democrats lost because they didn't embrace DEI enough. LOL, legal insurrection. I mean, you would have expected that the word woke would find its way in there, given that right-wing media's got their hands into it. It's very easy when you see the right wing mocking you for these policies to buy into the idea that they're right about them. Immigration and DEI are just unpopular with voters, but that isn't true. Polling shows that independent voters are overwhelmingly positive about DEI, with 59% of independents being in favour of continuing DEI initiatives. It isn't the message that the voters are uninspired by, it's the messenger. People are sick of politicians who don't believe a word they say, lying to your face to say you would die at fascism in a shiny centrist wrapper. The right's mocking Walz for defending DEI, but let's be honest, would they ever back down like that? During the Obama years, did they say, oh, immigration's polling badly, let's stop talking about it? No, they shouted louder. Every chewing gum rapper dropped by an immigrant would have got a press conference and a Fox News segment if they could. Say what you like about the right, but they do kind of push what they believe, and they do so relentlessly. So I kind of want to bring Sam in. Obviously, that video is quite telling, but what do you make of the way the right-wing media reacted to Walz's suggestion that the Democrats needed to be more bold about what they believe in? And do you think that they kind of need to be more aggressive in their approach?
I mean, the right wing media are always going to, they're always going to, as you've said, push their agenda to the extent that they're going to. Then they're not going to take anything that a Democrat says and particularly present it in a shining light. I think engaging with them and those outlets in good faith isn't particularly something that we on the left need to pay much attention to or particularly care about, because we know this is what they're going to do. Now, obviously, we can look at them to see what the specific arguments are, but it's probably more pressing towards the point you made that these are places by which the right wing voice it amplifies itself, and it does it unapologetically, and it's something that the left does need to do. You are right to suggest that it definitely is something they need to do. The left obviously comes to it with a different context, though. The left comes towards it, particularly in America and in Britain, with a sense of starting off on the back foot because of the hesitancy towards these concepts, the big macro concepts, socialism, etc., in these two countries, as compared to the way in which the right is kind of more agreeable, let's say, within these countries, or certainly has succeeded much more over the past 10 to 20 years. But yeah, in terms of if the left is going to succeed ever properly in any sort of significant way within these countries, you have to be unapologetic about making those arguments, particularly because these arguments and these policies that we champion, large stage nationalisation, looking at the way in which corporate greed and capitalist greed has destroyed a lot of the institutions within our country. The reason young people can't get houses anymore, the reason you can't get a doctor's appointment anymore, the reason the education system is in the way it is. All of these are arguments that the left can very, very easily win, because when we were making those arguments, in this country at least, when Corbyn was Labour leader and stuff, polls showed that the public agreed with us.
True.
There was widespread support for it. The issue is that when these arguments were being made, it also came with mainstream media, with large attacks from the right to discredit the entire campaign, to discredit the entire project, because of the way in which people were terrified of redistribution of wealth more than anything. So frustratingly, as much as these policies and being unapologetic about them is the right thing to do, we're always kind of going to be on the back foot because of the way in which the left is treated more unfairly.
I actually think it's a really great point, to be fair. It does seem, I think currently as well, if we're looking at the UK climate at the moment, reform are not doing too badly when it comes to the polls. So it's like, does it pay to be reactionary? Does it pay to be a populist? And I'm not saying that the left needs to be a populist or reactionary in nature, but it is getting a little bit frustrating when you see the right take on quite a stronghold in a lot of these, these local elections, and really win these voters because of the social resentment that they're harboring. It's easy to talk about immigration. It's easy to talk about, the cost of living crisis, because it's something that hits very, very close to home. But why is it that when it comes out of Starmer's mouth, not that I'm a Starmer fan, that people are just like, no, thank you, don't want to listen to anything you've got to say? It's frustrating.
Well, I think the issue I find about it is that a lot of the time, when we're trying to make these arguments, particularly, or maybe the people who are making these arguments in the public eye, there's almost like a not sort of like fakeness about them, because it's not fake. There's almost like a lack of communication skill. I mean, I'm not going to talk up Nigel Farage ever in my entire life, but unfortunately, he has proved himself to be a very effective communicator. And that was something I also thought about Tim Walz when I was watching that, which is that he can get away with saying stuff like that, mocking the Republicans for the group chat thing on Signal and saying it needed more DEI, because of the way in which he's such an effective communicator. And unfortunately, those are the kind of things you kind of have in you. And I think, at least in the British left right now, our really high-level effective communicators maybe aren't there in the same way, or particularly not in the same way that the right has. Because, once again, I don't want to talk up Trump, and he's a clearly insane man. His communication style is insane, but it is also effective, is the problem. By which, so he can say these things that are incredibly damaging, incredibly harmful, going to make the world worse, but he can get people to agree with him on it because of the way in which he's saying it as well. And also, it's the build. The issues are there.
Yeah.
People know what the issues are and they want them addressed. It's the way in which you build a campaign around it. The right now are giving a really sort of wholesale reason.
Conclusive. No,
Yeah,
sorry. Go ahead.
cause and effect. A cause and effect to outcome to this is what we do about it. Sales pitch that fundamentally the left isn't right now. We haven't built around those class-based issues for a long, long time. We haven't been
Yeah.
allowed to. And I think if we're going to succeed, that is where we need to start, because that's where we're going to do it.
I completely agree with you. And I think it's something we speak about quite a bit, this whole idea of like we need to be a little bit more aware of the fact that this is a class war, that we need to be class conscious. And the irony that the right are always kind of pinpointing that the left are always about identity politics, but actually the right do the exact same thing. But it seems that the right do it in a way that's palatable to the masses. So, like, how do we then get people on the left to realize, hey, we're in the middle of a class war? Because it does seem to be that the left has the right ideas, but it is the messenger. It is the fact that we have people on the left who claim to be left, but their policies, their legislations, their stance isn't giving left. It's giving very much, no, I'm sitting on the right when it comes to certain things. Like if we look at, and I know that we've kind of shifted from the US, but if we look at like, the Labour government at the moment of Rachel Reeves and what she's trying to do, this huge shift towards, well, I need to really, really clamp down on these benefit scroungers and the fact that people are fraudulently trying to claim PIP. Like it's obviously attacking the most impoverished in our communities, the most marginalised and minoritized in our communities. Then like where I genuinely don't know where we go from here. How do we tell people it's a class war?
Yeah, it's a really, really significant problem because what we know about this version of the Labour Party is that they'll do anything. Well, they would say anything to get into power, and now that they're in power, they'll do anything to stay in power. Which is often the way. I mean, it was never going to be a left-wing project anyway, but is the way in which any sort of progressivism always then gets clamped down upon. I mean, these disability cuts are mainly there. It's a twofold thing. They're terrified of the bond markets and the yield markets and doing anything that would cause even a slight economic downturn. But it's also a signal towards the social aspect of it, as you said. It's trying to fight reform at their own game, and then never, you're never going to out-reform reform because they're so good at what they do, right? They're so, as we said, unapologetic, and they believe in what they do. So there's no point attempting that, and it's frustrating because obviously we're not going to be able to get to the people who are at the top of government and get them to change their messaging now. But I think fundamentally, if on the ground and on the level and on the day-to-day, you can get people to understand that the reason the issues are there is because of the way in which class has been fundamentally attacked, not looked after, and exploited in recent time, post-financial crisis, post-COVID, once again. Those are the ways in which you're really going to build that. That's just the message that we have to keep pushing through. Keep pushing why can't you afford a house. Keep pushing why can we afford increased defence spending, but we can't afford increased spending on whatever progressive cause you would like. If you keep pushing that, after a while, I think people are going to start to ask the questions themselves.
Yeah, no, really, really great points, actually. I completely agree with you. I think it is needing that class solidarity. I think the awareness of the fact that these issues that we're facing at the moment aren't as a result of migrants who are coming in on boats, small boat migrants, but actually as a result of years and years of underinvestment and austerity. So constantly trying to shift the narrative towards that, I think, is what's going to be really useful. And I think, like you said, being relentless in that, really, really fundamental as well. So yeah, completely agree with you. Great point, Sam. I'm going to move on to the next story. So Here we are again, another week, another government scrambling to kill the bare minimum of progress. The UK's Independent Sentencing Council has introduced new guidelines that are due to start that essentially say before you lock someone up, get a pre sentence report if they're under 25, a woman from a racial background, or someone who is fleeing abuse, a religious minority, or someone who's pregnant. In other words, understand the context before dishing out punishment. That's it. But what's the government response? Panic, outrage, and emergency legislation. Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood says there will never be a two-tier sentencing approach under my watch. And Starmer says he's disappointed. Ministers are prepping a last minute bill to override the guidelines within 24 hours because nothing screams democracy like bulldozing an independent body to avoid a Daily Mail headline with the strapline that says two-tier care. Let's be clear, the Sentencing Council's chair, Lord Justice Dave, has already explained it. He says the rule of law requires that all offenders are treated fairly. The section of the guideline relating to pre-sentence reports is directed to the issue of information about offenders, no more and no less. But apparently for this government, even understanding the social realities that lead people into crime is too radical. Why? Because the real two-tier justice system already exists, Shabana, and it's not new. If we look at the stats, Black Brits make up 4% of the population, but 13% of the prison population. Young adults between the ages of 18 to 25 are 10% of society, but are a third of those locked up. And 57% of women in prison are survivors of domestic abuse. That's your two-tier system. One for the poor, the racialized, the abused. One for the people who get stopped, searched, sentenced, and forgotten. This guidance, I think, attempts to try and shift that. It tells judges, look deeper, think twice, and don't turn people into case numbers without knowing their story. But instead of backing it, Labour's front bench is falling over itself to look tough on crime, parroting Tory talking points about identity politics. And no one's banging that drum louder than Conservative MP Robert Jenrick. He called the guidance a virus and said it divides citizens by skin colour and religion. Sorry, Rob, are you a defender of equal justice? If justice is infected by anything, it's his party's decade-long assault of the poorest and the minoritized. Not a few judges asking for more information before handing out jail time. Surely this isn't about justice, it's about optics. It's about politicians defending the illusion of equality, whilst the reality is anything but. What do you think, Sam? The writer's saying that this is woke gone mad, and we're told judges should be blind, but isn't that just a euphemism for pretending class, race, and gender don't matter when they're everything in how punishment is handed out?
Yeah, I mean, this is a mess. It's one of those things that I think, in the long run, probably isn't going to be like talked about at a high level or remembered too much outside of maybe people like ourselves who are like very invested in this sort of thing politically. But I think it speaks to a much wider, I'll say, issue with the current government, which is, as you were explaining, their severe obsession with optics and their the way they're terrified of being perceived as anything remotely left or progressive in that top level way. I went and I read about pre-sentencing reports when obviously I knew I was coming on here to talk about them. And I actually read Lord Davis's letter that he sent back to Shabana Mahmood in regards to this entire issue. And he essentially explained, from what I understand, that she requested that the full list of people for who pre-sentencing reports are sort of required or suggested be removed because of the them wanting to put ethnic, cultural, and faith minorities. So instead, like just targeting that, they've suggested that, or the Labour government suggested that if a pre-sentencing report was going to help, then it would be sought out anyway. This is the process which would occur. And Lord Davis, the leader of the Sentencing Council, essentially said back to her, if that was going to happen, it would already happen. Why do you think we've had to put this in place?
Yeah.
And it's bizarre because it's like, firstly, why is the government trying to get so involved in the judiciary, in
Yeah.
the outcomes of and the way in which outcomes are affected by the judiciary? Second, is that suggesting that we of the judiciary or somehow the independence of the compromised? And it, back to the weird specificities and the terror, the headlines again, the terror of being called two-tier Kiev. Instead of actually just trying to explain this to people, instead of creating a sophisticated and effective messaging system to get it through the media into the public to explain what, I really don't think people long term would care about this. The only thing you could see the way in which the right will, are to exploit it. And instead of defending it, instead of cracking down and saying this is obviously going to be good because an independent body has recommended we do this, no, they've essentially forced them to suspend plans. Which is happening now.
Yeah, absolutely. No, completely agree with you. And it's what's interesting as well is that this institutional bias already exists, but what they're doing is that they're prioritizing how they're viewed in the media way more than actually interrogating the mishaps, the issues that form the fabrics of a lot of the systems that we already exist within. The system is in fact already two tiered, and how do we know this? Because decades of data literally prove that the justice system already treats people differently based on the factors that we've listed earlier today. And actually often worse based on some of those factors. So it's not by explicit rule, but it's already through deeper biases and social inequalities. So there's long been a two-tier reality. So when I hear Shabana say or claim that I'm not going to accept a two-tier system, I'm like, hello, babes, it's already a two-tier system. And I think the move here, I think, is an attempt to make justice a little bit more equal and not less. But I don't know if they're going to see it that way. So I guess my next question for you is, when a government rushes in this sort of way to override independent sentencing advice because it's worried about how it looks politically, what does that actually say about the state of our democracy? What do you think about that?
It's concerning, isn't it? Because as I've said, if you start to call into question the rule of law, if you start to call into question the way in which the judiciary operates, where is that going to end? Where the entire point of our system is to have is to be able to bring laws into effect and have them effectively implemented. And if then the government is essentially saying these laws aren't being effectively implemented, then it is up to them to do something about that. But this isn't what this is. This is them telling the judiciary that they're doing it wrong and they need to do it in a different way, which is completely separate to government-led intervention on these sorts of things. As you've said, there is a two-tier system already. There's always been a two-tier system in this country, in probably every country when it comes to justice, because fundamentally, crime and crime rates are disproportionately affecting working class people, ethnic minorities, survivors of abuse, stuff that we've said previously. And if you are really going to tackle crime, if you're going to tackle and bring crime rates down and create a more equal system, then you're going to tackle essentially the economic factors that really cause them. The way in which people grow up, essentially being led into these lives and these livelihoods and thinking this is the way of life that is effective, or it being the way of life that is the most effective for these people. It's terrifying from a democratic standpoint because it once again seems like we can see these issues and we can see the way in which they're manifesting and they're going to continue to manifest. And each time we invest our hope or our actual mandate in a group of people to do it, they fail to do so, and they seem to attack, once again, different aspects of even the state themselves and the system to avoid actually addressing the issues at hand. And it is scary, and it makes us call into question why we bother interacting with it. But it also makes us call into question, can we trust them to be the ones doing it? I don't know if we can.
I think it's a really good question because, and I don't know if we can actually either. I can't answer that. I personally don't at this very moment in time, because if there was, and like it goes back to what you were saying, a willingness to interrogate why these things are happening in the first place, then you would try or attempt at least to fix the years and years of austerity that people have had to deal with, fix the fact that all of these cuts have happened to youth services, the fact that community centres aren't even existing anymore. Like, crime is increasing because inequality is increasing. So what are you going to do about it? I think these are the questions we should be asking. It's not whether, I think Keir Starmer needs to put his, his ego aside, and Shabana needs to, you know, really get in the real world. It's naive, I think, for any of us to ignore the political optics that come with this. And I do think that the Labour Party, in some ways, and this is going to be super critical, have proven that they're happy to dip their toe into culture wars on the issue, because they know the attacks that are going to come from the right. They know that the right are going to say, "Oh, two-tier Keir back at it again." So they're going to dabble with that sort of stuff. I think we already exist in a divided justice system that doesn't favor anyone, but particularly really ostracizes those that come from minoritized backgrounds. So the fact that he's too scared or too afraid of the fact that he's going to be painted as someone who does favor minorities, I think says a lot about the fact that he's unwilling to rectify the issues that are already being placed or entrenched in our society at the moment. And that, to me, makes justice seem more performative than principled. And it's ironic because Shabana and Keir, I'm pretty sure, both come from, law backgrounds. So they would know too well what the justice system entails when it comes to the harm for minoritized communities. So there is a level of irony there. And Shabana also comes from a minoritized background, so she would know all too well what an unfair system looks like. Not that I'm trying to weaponize her identity, but I do think that there needs to be an open willingness to confront that uncomfortable truth.
No, I absolutely agree with you on that. It's obviously more performative, because if it wasn't, it would be addressing the actual issues, and we know that's not what it's doing. They are inherently terrified of not being able to deal with the media backlash and the communication backlash. The way this actual report and these new guidelines came about all happened under the previous government anyway.
Exactly.
So it's not even like they were directly involved with creating this, with implementing it, with anything like that. All that's happened is it's come through, and they've realised, oh no, if any one of these can stick, it's over for us. Reform are gonna surge in the polls, and then the narrative's done. It's over. And it's a really sad way of governing, actually, because why are you there? Why are you in government? Fundamentally, you're in government to make things better.
It's true.
Why are you there? Why are you there? If you don't want to make things better, why are you there?
It's true.
And it's really frustrating, because these are very, very significant issues that need to come through. But now we have people, like you said, who come from law backgrounds, who haven't actually been within the communities that are directly affected by these things for so long in their lives now. As again, I'll unfortunately keep, pounding this drum for probably my entire life. It is going to be a class-based issue. And unless you're willing to address it like that, unless you're willing to see that, again, all of these top-level government policies, all of these top-level, the cuts that you were talking about, disproportionately affect people, working-class people, real working class people too, not the working class people that, Starmer will just again shout the words working class people and hope that it works. No, like real people in their everyday lives are affected by this over and over and over again, and that's how we get this two-tier system that is pushed through and seen in the statistics that you were talking about. And unless you're going to be willing to address that, nothing is going to change. But as we've said, they're not going to be willing to address that because they're terrified of, the backlash, and they don't have a plan to combat it.
So no plan whatsoever. No plan to fix the fact that minoritized communities are struggling. No plan to fix the fact that working class communities are literally in dire need of help. So yeah, in true cynical fashion, I think that the outrage over two-tier justice has a lot of theatre to it. And if both government and opposition are furiously agreeing that these guidelines are bad, then I think one wonders who they are probably performing for. They're definitely not performing for us. So I think there needs to be, they need to interrogate that. They need to go back to the drawing board with that one. But I will. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sam. No, go ahead.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, and the thing you've got to remember is that they're not ever affected by stuff like this, not anymore. They may have been when they were younger. They're definitely not now. They don't exist within the world and within knowing people having themselves directly affected by the way in which the justice system is or can manifest. So essentially we have people working at that very top who have no idea what they're actually trying to do. They have no real experience of what's going on. And once again, unless that is something that is directly addressed, then it's never going to change.
Completely agree with you. And it sounds so pessimistic to say, but it's true. It won't change until that is addressed. But I will move on. But before we move on, if you are enjoying our show, please like and hit the subscribe button. Once the show is finished, come back and leave a comment. We definitely read them, but it also helps the algorithm. We are just a group of volunteers who are trying to turn this into a full media organisation where this becomes our full-time job. So if you'd like to support us, you can go to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. And there you can sign up to our Patreon and support us for as little as £3 a month. Don't put yourself out. So you can also give us a one-off donation if you're able to through the website as well. Or alternatively, you can become a member on YouTube for 99p. But on to our final story. A Tufts PhD student was snatched off the street by masked federal agents this week. Let's have a look.
Where the police?
Yeah, you don't look like it. Why are you hiding your faces? Why are you hiding your faces?
So Rumeysa Öztürk, a 30-year-old Muslim woman and Fulbright scholar, was on her way to break her Ramadan fast when ICE agents in plain clothes and unmarked cars swarmed her, confiscated her phone, cuffed her, and literally disappeared her. No charges, no warning, no due process. Their excuse, they claim she supported Hamas. But her actual crime, writing a student op-ed supporting Palestinian rights and calling for Tufts to divest from Israel. Let's be crystal clear, no evidence has been made public, no charges have been filed. Her visa was cancelled on the spot. This isn't law enforcement, it's political punishment, and it's part of a wider crackdown. Because under Trump 2.0, protest is being reclassified as terrorism, especially if you're Muslim, immigrant, or you utter the words Free Palestine out loud. Trump literally is attempting to root out pro-Palestinian activism on campuses under the guise of Executive Order 14188. Now, federal agents are following through, snatching students with no charges, no trial, just mere suspicion. Just weeks ago, Mahmoud Khalil, a Palestinian grad student, was arrested in New York. No crime, yet again, just aligned with Hamas, quote unquote. Another student, Rajani Srinivasan, fled to Canada after ICE showed up at her door 3 times for standing near a protest. Do you notice the pattern? All racialized, all international, all punished for protest. The government's message seems to be pretty clear. If you're not a citizen, keep your head down or we'll come for you. Even Tufts University said they had no idea. The ACLU, CAIR, and even Senator Elizabeth Warren are calling it what it is, a direct assault on civil rights and academic freedom. Ozturk's now in ICE detention in Louisiana. No trial, no timeline, just the message. Dissent isn't allowed if you weren't born here. And I can't help but wonder, would this have happened if she were white, Christian, or American born? Sam, what do you make of the way the state is targeting racialized international students for their speech? And is this just the tip of a much darker iceberg in how protest is being criminalized in the US right now?
I mean, this one's terrifying, isn't it? I saw this video obviously earlier in the week, and it sounds daft, but like when I first saw it, I almost like didn't really believe it was real. When I was watching it, I was like, what am I even looking at here? I was like, what do you mean? And then obviously as immediately as the story had developed and I read it, it is horrifying, and I think it's part of sort of like a two-pronged strategy by the American state, which is both top-level signalling, political signalling of, once again, because this is an incredibly right-wing government who have said they're going to crack down on immigration, and who are obviously foreign policy wise going to do everything they can to quote unquote defend America in the world, which is where their support for Israel comes from. It's really high level signaling. If they do this visibly on the street, if these videos get out, then people will see that they are being active. Their supporters will see that they're not lying about what they said they would do. They're being very active about targeting anybody who would support Hamas or voice support for Hamas or voice support for the Palestinian cause, it seems.
Yeah.
But simultaneously, as you suggested, there's a very sinister edge to the fact that we know Donald Trump and this version of the government do not care for democracy, do not care for democratic systems, and very much, are pushing the limits and seeing what is viable for them to do. Because he's going to want to try and get a third term come 2028, which obviously we know is illegal, unconstitutional in America. And if he can prime the ground before that, if he's figuring out what he can do before that, yeah, it's a very terrifying. It's a terrifying thing to witness happen.
It is terrifying, and you're absolutely right. Like, this is a man, complete authoritarian, fascist in my eyes. Like, he is someone who is testing the limits of what he can get away with. And this government, I think, is starting with those who are obviously least able to fight back. And I think they're doing it under the guise of national security. They're like, hey, they've just said they support Palestine. They think that Palestine should be free from settler colonialism, from the genocide that they're facing, etc., etc. They must be supporters of Hamas. Like, this, it's actually insane. It's asinine to think that people are now saying that, yeah, you're a national security threat, and we're going to take from what you're saying because you're against Zionism, that you're therefore a threat to democracy, a threat to America, essentially. So is this actually about maintaining political control over people and movements that challenge empire, racism, and capital?
It's always going to be. It always have to be. This is the country of McCarthyism, isn't it? Like you can suggest that stuff has changed, but it really, really hasn't. And yeah, once a country like this, always a country like this, I suppose. It's it's it is interesting because obviously people like this aren't going to bring down America. People like this are not really going to stop Israel doing what it is doing at will right now, because that will only come, unfortunately, from the top level policy decisions, foreign policy decisions, and what's happening on the ground in Palestine itself. So naturally, stuff like this, visible stuff like this, it's a lot of posturing. It's ensuring that people are afraid. People are afraid of saying what they believe in if it is not something that the American state itself believes in. It's ensuring that in order to avoid the issue of these protests happening in the future, for example, if he can crack down upon them now, maybe you'll never have to deal with them again in the future because people are too scared to do it. That's what the aim is, I think, fundamentally more than anything. And especially because this happened at a tiny university as well. This university has like 13,000 students. This is America. They have multiple universities with over 100,000 students. This is not a significant thing, but
True.
it's also part because obviously Trump said he would suspend national funding from universities if they weren't seen to be dealing with these issues. And fundamentally, I think he can't do that, or he wouldn't be able to get away with that. So he's targeting, once again, these smaller ones where maybe he will be able to, throw his weight around more and get away with it compared to the real big ones, the ones with international renown. Once again, as a signalling measure, as a posturing measure, and as a way of trial and erroring potentially worse tactics.
It was such a frightening time to think that you can't even speak out against atrocities that are happening unless it aligns with the status quo. Like, how is it that we are at a time where you willingly speak out? No, she didn't even speak out. She just wrote an article. Like that. That's the most heinous thing in this. Like, she just wrote an article, and the traumatizing spectacle of having these masked individuals who aren't really carrying their badges just approach you in such an invasive manner and say, yeah, well, we're taking you and now you're going to spend some time in a detention center. Like, it's now becoming this consistent pattern, and I'm not saying this is the first time the US government's done this. It did it previously with Biden and his efforts when it came to migration and immigration, and Obama too. But this feels so theatrical in nature, like the political theatre. And I think we should be confronted with videos like this to know how heinous of a time it is in the US, and how we're moving towards an authoritarian rule and a dictatorship, essentially, where you are ostracized for merely having an opinion. And my fear is that this trend is going to continue and proliferate in ways that we won't be able to really like get through it anymore. Like, it's going to be almost impenetrable. Like, we cannot even get through a government that's so hard-headed and who does things just off a whim. So that's my fear at the moment.
Yeah, I think as well, at this point now, you're seeing a lot of public support in our country, and I think in America too, for Israel diminishing because of how visible these atrocities are, for the way in which the genocide is unfortunately being televised almost. So what's happening is that a lot of that political support, a lot of that tacit support for American foreign policy, Western foreign policy in general, is, I was going to say slowly, but quite quickly eroding.
Yeah.
People are seeing that there's a clear moral binary here. And so I think America in particular are becoming much more worried about what could happen, because this is not going to get better for them. Support for Israel isn't just going to miraculously go up in the next however many months, because this is going to keep happening. So they're having to turn to these much more directly authoritarian sort of actions because they're almost not getting to their sort of like last straw or getting into a desperation mode, but they're certainly the narrative has shifted. The tacit support for it is no longer there,
Yeah.
and I think that really, really worries them, particularly with the way in which then the rest of the sort of international relations aspect of it is coming on, particularly with the way in which you might have a surging Russian presence, a surging Chinese presence, the way in which that sort of alliance may form. And yeah, I think they're really, really worried.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. No, completely agree with you. Great points, honestly, Sam. Let's bring our producer in and go to some comments. I think, yeah, you've definitely made some great points, Sam. I'm really, really impressed. Do we have our producer?
We do. Am I audible to you
Yay.
guys? And I'll just
Yes,
ask the comments if I'm audible as well. If people in
I
the
can hear
comments can
you.
just confirm. Superb. Okay, and I will
And it's
just
Cog. Oh my God, it's
yes.
Cog, guys. Say hi to Cog.
Yes. Okay. What are people saying? Can they hear me? And to scroll to the bottom now. If somebody in the comments could just confirm that you can all hear me, that would be wonderful. Superb. Thanks, Specs Bean Farmer. Specs Bean Farmer got there first. Marvellous. Okay. So let's go through and see what we've got. First of all, we have Stephen Parrott just became a member, so thank you so much for that,
Thank you,
Stephen.
Stephen.
Honestly means a lot to us here. It makes the biggest difference. Helps us keep the studio lights on more than the actual lights, but the studio lights are kept on by your kind donations. So we really do appreciate it. And so going back to the first story, and what was that? Going back to the first story? Yes, yes, it is. And sorry, these are in a funny order now. Sorry. Let's just go into this one. So, in relation to the sentencing reports, John Baines said, "Glad they've seen sense and stopped them. The law should be independent of immutable characteristics, not altered depending on them." I wanted to get your guys' reaction to this because I have certain feelings about it, but obviously you can get into it.
Sam, do you want to go ahead with that one?
Um, yeah, I
That's taking me by surprise. That comment slightly.
Um, I think maybe what I think on it is less important than what the people involved think on it. I'll go back to Lord Davis's letter and say that in the letter he specifically said that frequently the information provided in these pre-sentencing reports will not assist the offender's prospect of avoiding a custodial sentence, rather the reverse. Um, it's not a case. This isn't a case of bringing in characteristics to alter how a case is judged. This is a case of providing full context because it's not just about ethnic minorities, it's about age, it's about if a person's a survivor of abuse. It's also explicitly about if an offender has understood the severity of their offence, what their attitude towards their offence is, the risk of reoffending, and stuff like this are included on these reports. So what I will say is it's not particularly pushing in immutable characteristics as much as supporting the legal system to do its job. And if you support the legal system, then there's nothing to be worried about.
No, I guess, but also justice has never really ever been, one size fits all, right? Like not in a society as unequal as ours. I think if anything, we know for a fact that the current system unintentionally dishes out two-tier justice against minorities and marginalized groups and those of a certain age and those who are fleeing abuse. Harsher punishments and less leniency due to systemic bias and lack of context. So I think, and I will say that I want to see where it goes. I think this is an attempt to kind of correct that bias by formally instructing these judges, like, can you slow down and get the facts right before you jail people? or from these groups, because we know that blind spots exist. And I think anyone who denies that blind spots exist in the system are part of the problem. Like, wake up and realize that there are people who are ostracized on the basis of certain characteristics um without the context there. So that's where I stand with it.
Yeah.
I think
I suppose in a way we agree with John, because we also agree that the law should be independent of immutable characteristics, but it's not, is it? We know it's
Exactly.
not. So
Exactly.
exactly. It's not a neutral position to do nothing, to just allow the status quo to persist. That's not a neutral position. I also want to say my mic should be a lot clearer now, because I didn't realize that it auto connected to my camera mic. So that should be a lot clearer. Is that a lot louder for everybody?
I
A
think,
lot
yeah,
clearer.
you sound great to me.
Superb, brilliant. Okay, so Jamie said in relation to Tim Walz, this guy is based, so the Democrats will probably try to neuter and bury him. I think that's broadly something we can all agree on. And Neckley, who is a friend of mine and Sarah, says
I
Democrats
think
are mostly conservative. The ones that have goals that are more left, Bernie Sanders and AOC, for example, they tend to be more outspoken, and they do tend to stand on their principles. Have you guys seen the what's it called, Stop Oligarchy tour that they've been involved with? Bernie Sanders and
yes.
AOC. Yes, it's bringing in numbers in the USA, like
mhm.
numbers, and I'd have thought they'd have learned from that. But can you think of why they might not have like taken that on board and learned from it? What's your opinions on that?
Good question. Good question. One that I kind of need to think about for a second, actually. I don't It's a really good
Um,
question, Cog.
the Democrat Party are going to Democrat. This is in their nature, unfortunately. They are, to their very core, you know, liberal centrist, classical liberal, liberal conservative leaning. They are not a progressive party. So when it really comes to the core of it, they are averse to progressivism. It doesn't matter whether it has popular support. We've seen that time and time again. We saw it with Bernie in 2016 and 2020. We saw it with the way they just pushed in Kamala Harris in 2024, late stage by arduous and very bad process.
Mm.
Yeah, if you're trying to depend on the Democrat Party for any sort of real change, you're going to be waiting a long, long time.
You will be waiting a long time. I will say though, like, I don't back them with my whole heart, but I certainly don't back the Republicans. So it is, but I think we would be waiting a long time. But I think I will give credit where credit's due. When I'm seeing like these movements kind of come about, like Bernie Sanders is now coming through, and he's incredibly popular at the moment, and his stance on Gaza isn't one where he's sitting on the fence. Like, he is very much out there and speaking out about it with his full chest, as some may say. But so, and same with the AOC. So it is it's interesting. It's interesting. AOC, I think, and Sanders are doing relatively okay at the moment. I will have my criticisms of them slightly, but I do think that there are certain things that I align with when it comes to their viewpoints.
Hmm.
So
I
yeah.
I do think that there's I do think that what you've said about the Democrats not wanting to entertain anything left wing is 100% true.
Mm.
But I also think that much of this is a strategic critique. It's not and this is, I feel, something that perhaps people in the chat um, were misinterpreting a little bit, because people were saying that Tim Walz had been very harsh on Black Lives Matter. And I agree, there are definitely faults with the way that Tim Walz, Bernie Sanders, these people have operated. But what we're concerned about is their message being effectively put across? The message in itself isn't really the problem. A great deal of the problem is, I mean, the fact that they are out of touch with people on things like Gaza. It's not helping anything. But even putting forward a message with a reasonable degree of passion, even if you do, you've got to identify an enemy. You've got to put forward your message passionately, and you've got to realize this stuff isn't unpopular. It's
Mm.
unpopular because you keep giving ground to the Republicans.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I think it goes back to what everyone was saying earlier as well. Cole, you're absolutely right. Maybe to be a bit more aggressive in the approach, maybe that's what's needed. And I think you're absolutely right, Sam and Cog, in the sense that I think they're caving into being a bit soft and not so staunch on where they stand. And I think that that's the issue. There's not much cohesion. You'll find that they're probably arguing over semantics more than anything else. So I think there is cohesion when it comes to certain ideologies on the right, but the left sometimes really miss out on that, particularly the Democrats, I would say.
And with...
Oh, go on.
Sorry.
No, you could.
No, I was going to say, with Sanders and AOC, and even Waltz, as we talked about earlier, they have a handful of really quite effective communicators in the party who are clearly aspirational too. So I am very I am quite excited to see what the 2028 primary looks like for them in terms of the types of arguments being made, by who and how, because I think there's a sort of a real chance for a sort of leftist coalition within the party, those sort of factions, to really emerge and really support a candidate to the extent that they can. I think there's a real sort of potential for that. It's just whether the rest of the party obviously give any ground to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to highlight this comment because it's connected to this from Vicky Clee. I think she put it really well. In my opinion, the left need to stop trying to persuade using facts and data so much and approach it with more confidence and certainty. Also include facts, but don't rely on them with changing minds. I think Vicky is absolutely right. I think we need to put the passion into it. It matters not what you say, it matters how you say it. And for anybody who's listening to this who wants to get into the kind of content that we do, who wants to get into leftist political content creation, focus on the how. Don't focus on the what, right? It's not, because if you're trying to say something completely new, forget it. Somebody else has already said it. What we need to do is focus on what we're saying. It's the vibe, it's the aesthetic of what we're saying, because ultimately we are trying to get a message across to an audience that is almost entirely aesthetics based. Like, aesthetics is the era that we are living in my opinion. I don't know if you guys want to jump in on the idea of aesthetics.
That's an interesting one. I don't know, because when I look at the right, is their aesthetics just being a reactionary individual, like just someone who's a populist? I don't know how I feel about that, because I want things to be, maybe I'm being too individualistic here. I want things to be backed with facts and data. I want to see the statistics, because I feel like that makes an argument more tangible. That makes the art of persuasion more tangible. Like, Aristotle's 3 modes of persuasion: ethos, pathos, and logos. Like, I don't think you can have one and not the other. So I feel like you have to use all of those things. You have to use empathy. You have to use stats. You have to use credibility. Not, I don't. Maybe that's just my personal opinion, though.
Sam, do you want to jump in?
I would agree with you, Cog.
Oh wow!
As I said earlier,
I'll remove myself.
I'm sorry.
I'll just.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I can't lie on the live stream as much as I'd love to. As I said earlier, I think I think the left have a real. I don't think we have a legitimacy crisis at all, because as you were talking about, Sarah, we have the logos. We have if anything, we have the logical explanation to everything. The issue is, it's getting that pathos through.
It's true.
It's getting it put across in a way that people will want to listen to. I don't want to spend time particularly criticizing Jeremy Corbyn, because I am a fan. However, I think during that period of time there were significant attacks within the House of Commons chamber, within debate structure and stuff, came not towards what he was saying, but particularly towards him, the way he looked, and sort of how he was saying it, and the fact that he just like gardened on the weekends and stuff like that.
Right.
And that's, as much as that's like ridiculous, it's unfair, it's not conducive to political debate, it is what happens. Unfortunately, if a leftist is going to succeed, they need to be like perfect, which is difficult. It's basically impossible. But you probably need to have someone like young, charismatic, good looking,
Confident.
confident, willing to argue, willing to call out the right on their bullshit, etc., etc. Yeah, it's difficult, but I think the aesthetic principle of it is almost as important as the rest for us now.
Interesting.
I did want to.
Yeah, you're probably
I did
right.
want to hear what Sam said there, but I did also want to say, Sarah, I don't disagree with you. You're trying to you're bringing
Facts over
you're
feelings. That's what
talking
I'm getting.
about facts, but you're not wrong. That I think
No,
the
you guys are
thing
right.
the thing is though is you're not wrong. It's just we're not saying remove the facts. What we're saying is currently the left doesn't do the aesthetics bit. It doesn't do
Agreed.
the rhetoric. The
Agreed.
rhetoric is the big thing, right? Who's the probably the most successful leftist in the last few weeks? The most successful like left wing. I know he doesn't define himself as a left winger, but Gary's economics.
Gary Stevenson.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Gary Stevenson, Gary's
yeah,
economics, right? And what is
he's
unique about
amazing.
Gary? Like when you see him speak, he speaks to you. He speaks
He
to the
does.
camera. He speaks to the audience. He is speaking directly to people. It doesn't sound scripted. It sounds like he believes what he is saying, and that comes across in his rhetoric. If the left focuses on rhetoric, I really feel like we can move forward with that. But also, we should move forward with the comments because otherwise
I
we'll spend
agree.
ages on one
No,
comment.
but I agree with that entirely. I actually do. I've been swayed. Maybe that's what needs to happen. It's because of how you guys said it. That's why.
Thus proving the point. So Edward says in relation to the sentencing council, this ought not be remotely controversial. The point is, unequal sentences already exist, and Sarah is now proving that with the stats. See, you got the rhetoric, you got the stats. That's what we like.
Just need the charisma. No, I agree completely. I completely agree with that. It's difficult. It's difficult. Living in an unequal society and trying to point out the fact that it's an unequal society and people have still got their blinders on. They're like, no, absolutely not. I think we should just not recognize difference. It's like, no, we should recognize difference. But we also need to recognize, and this is exactly what you were saying, Sam. There's a class element to it. Yeah, like there is a class element to it that everyone seemingly affected by. So yeah, don't know what else to say on that. I completely agree.
Yeah, Sam, did you want to jump in on that one, or are you all right?
And it's one of those things. It's once again, I think the the argument loses the specifics of what is important here.
Exactly.
It gets so tied into the fact that Labour are so terrified of that backlash that we were talking about that they've focused so specifically on saying we shouldn't include ethnic minorities in these reports that we should just remove this aspect of the report altogether. And that's why the sentencing council were like, what are you talking about? But obviously making that point, making the wider point of like, this is why these things exist, doesn't cut through in the same way as, for example, Tuti Akia's At It Again does, which is a difficult thing to marry up.
It is.
I don't think I can make this analogy quite work, but I do think that often the best defense is an offense. There's a reason that like feinting exists in boxing and wrestling and in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Like you go out of your way to try to provide some attack, and I feel like that is also what part of what Labour's missing when they deal with the Daily Mail. You know, they're
Yeah.
all defense. They're all backing away
Yeah.
and
It's
hitting.
a high press. They need to press the opposition's penalty box, press in, get the fullbacks up. They won't be able to move out. But you
Nice.
can't. They're not doing that.
I wish I knew what that meant. I don't speak football.
It's a football analogy. I'm sorry.
Oh God, where's the VAR? That's all I know.
Okay. And Specs Bean Farmer entirely correctly says Labour is now the party of work, and not
Yes.
workers.
I
this is
think I
really
said this the other day. I said this the other day, or I tried to say it the other day, but I didn't land it as well as I should have done. that they care so much about work and not the people who are actually working. It's the wildest thing. It actually enrages me inside. I feel myself getting hot every time I think about it. How is it that a party that claims to be for the workers isn't actually for the workers? You're against the workers. It's wild. Wild.
It's me. So in my friendship group, we've had a joke for a long time where we'll be like, "This is just like 1984," of something that's not like it's not. It's difficult to explain. It's not funny. It's funny to us. Something that isn't at all like 1984. When this came in, I went to my friend Tom and I was like, Tom, you know what I'm gonna say here, and he was there like, the worst part is this is just like 1984. We loved it, and obviously we're not being too serious with that, but the way in which changing from like changing that actual the literal words in the narrative from the party of workers to the party of work overnight without consulting anybody or pretending it was ever different is very unfortunate. Like, war is peace, ignorance is. It's been a long time since I read 1984. I'm so sorry, but it is actually terrifying, and nobody's calling them out on it, and nobody's like actually making the point of that. That is not what the trade union movement was about. That is not what the labour movement was about. We wanted to, if anything, get away from work, not be the party of it. It's actually terrifying. It's
so terrifying.
It has made me angry this week.
Agreed.
You'll find, Sam, unfortunately, that I draw a lot of Nazi analogies because it was my sort of field of study at uni. But the obviously above the gates of Auschwitz were the words Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free, and that obviously that's not just a coincidence. That is because the Nazis were aligned with the capital class, and some of the first people that they targeted were the asocials, the asocials, those who essentially like benefit claimants, today's sort of disability benefit claimants, the people who weren't in society, and of course they went after the mentally ill and the physically handicapped as well. It is worth saying that attitude has a connection to a really dark past. I'm not saying that Labour are the same as the Nazis, not at all. But I'm saying there's a rhyme there. There's a whiff of something nasty there. I wanted to let you guys decipher this one. So this is to do with the final story about Rumesa Öztürk. What do we think this means?
Oh, ice
Ice peach.
hammer.
What do we think?
If I'm taking peach in a
I'll give you a clue. The first word isn't ice.
Oh,
cube.
It's
Where
where do you
what
put
is
ice?
it? What is it?
Where do you put ice?
In the fridge? Freezer?
Freezer. Okay, so freeze. What is that?
free speech.
Yay! There we go. It's free speech
Oh,
being
smart.
crushed. It's clever, isn't that? Yeah.
Sorry, it's literally been
I like that.
it's been a
like that a
Monday.
lot.
My brain's so slow. I'm really disappointed I didn't get that first.
No, that's good. I think that'd be a fun comment to bring up because that's a good little.
No, I
bit,
like
and it's
that
That was
one.
nice,
entirely true.
Vicky.
That's really good. I'm sorry for putting you guys on the spot like that. I'll try not to do that in the future. So we had some agreement and some disagreement on this story. So Marriage Causes Divorce came in and said she probably visited worrying websites, hence the arrest.
That's not
Would
what
you guys
happened.
like to react to this?
I mean, but Marriage Causes Divorce has been here before, and just bless his heart or their heart. That's not what happened. And I'd urge them to go look into the story before commenting things that might assert a false narrative, because that's the danger I think we're seeing at the moment. This proliferation of fake news, of things that are fraudulent in nature to assert a political agenda, and that's not what's happening here. I don't think that writing an article where you are criticizing Zionism is one that's worthy of being rushed up upon by a bunch of masked individuals, I don't think it's an appropriate thing to do. So yes.
Well, we've also kind of sort of piece by piece come to understood why the arrest has taken place, and I suppose the suggestion of worrying websites is something more to do with you know, actionable, let's say, terrorist acts or something like that, something that may cause harm to society. And if that was the case, she wouldn't be arrested by particularly these people from the Department of Homeland Security, and it wouldn't have happened as publicly as it did. So that's just quite quantifiably not true.
Agreed.
I think it's worth saying that again, there's that connection to the Third Reich. There's that connection to the. I'm thinking particularly of the Sondergerichte, the special courts, because ultimately the way that the Third Reich operated legally was by having an extrajudicial arm. So essentially, you'd have the courts and you'd have the special courts. And even if you were found not guilty in one of the courts or the special courts, sometimes you would find that the Schutzstaffel or the SS were waiting for you outside to take you to a concentration camp, irrespective of whether or not you'd committed the crime. And the point is the law moves too fast for the judiciary, right? The executive branch moves too fast for the judiciary. The judiciary just can't keep up. It is not an exaggeration to say that this woman was disappeared in an authoritarian state by the secret police. Like every single word of that sentence is true.
Mm-hmm.
And it is
Mm-hmm.
terrifying. Nobody knew where she was. She was transported, and nobody could find out anything for quite a while. And I'd say to marriage causes divorce, she might let's say you're correct. Let's say she's visited worrying websites. Okay, doesn't change anything. Do you want to set a precedent where people are disappeared by the secret police in the streets? And I'm just guessing from your views, marriage causes divorce. I'm just guessing, but I'm guessing that you're somebody who's in favour of small government. Is a small government one where the secret police can disappear you off the street and hold you in permanent confinement without trial, and you have no rights to your lawyer. You've got no rights to for people to know where you are. You can be literally transported to another country that's known for torturing its prisoners without any trial. And if you say you're okay with that, imagine what happens in a Kamala Harris presidency, right? You are handing these powers over to the state, and the people that you like are not always going to be in charge. And if that doesn't frighten you, frankly, I don't think you're very bright.
And it's going back to post 9/11 era policies that had this sort of false consciousness and almost coerced consent put into them that was, you know, flooded through the Iraq War era and beyond, of the way in which crackdowns upon people could were justified, were legal because of ethnic backgrounds, because of websites they visited, because of people they hung around with. You know, it's something that America have been doing for 20 and longer than 20 years, don't get me wrong, but this specifically what I'm talking about has been happening for over 20 years now, hasn't it? And you know, it's the additional building on it. You don't get this probably without the way in which that groundwork was laid back then, which obviously you didn't get then without the ones that came before it and all that. It's a building upon the way in which the state apparatus is able to really cut down upon its anybody who disagrees with it.
Agreed.
Absolutely. I did want to clarify, since I brought up some comments which obviously disagreed. The majority of our audience is entirely on our side, and entirely on the side, I think, of reason. And I want to highlight as our last comment the Kisler's comment.
I think I know that person.
Because they said she only wrote an article. She didn't even protest. She just supported human rights and got arrested. Absolutely insane. And I 100% agree.
I agree.
I do want to add as well that she was accused of supporting Hamas. The article,
Yes.
if you read it, doesn't mention Hamas. Like, it doesn't mention support for
at
Hamas.
all. But Cog, isn't that interesting though? Because I think that always happens. I will never forget. I'm pretty sure it was when Corbyn was running. Someone behind him. This was years ago, and I'm really cast. Like, I don't know if this was a dream or if it was actually reality. Because when I think about things that were so long ago, I can't decipher between reality and a dream. But someone said, like, whispered terrorist sympathizer behind his back. This was a long time ago. And I don't know if anyone remembers that video. If someone does, then please let me know. I think I need to find it. And they mouthed it and they got caught mouthing it. And then he got called out for it after. But I find that this is actually a common trend when people call out things that are evidently atrocious, like Zionism. I feel like we always have to differentiate, say to people, hey, discern the fact that just because you're calling out Zionism doesn't mean that you're against Israeli people. Just because you're calling out Zionism doesn't mean that you're against people who are Jewish. Like, we always have to consistently like make that abundantly clear. But yeah, saying that you're in support of Palestine, people then go, oh yeah, Hamas supporter. No, absolutely not. It's like, freedom for Palestinians does not mean that you support Hamas. Come on, wake up.
And by the same token, that it's almost never done the same way the other way round. No one who supports Israel, barely anyone who supports Israel, is told, well, does that mean you support like bombing Palestinian children? Tens of thousands of Palestinian children bombed, literally little babies blown apart. Are you okay with that? Like, the same scrutiny simply isn't held.
True.
Yeah, it's this, as you said, it's like if if the issue, then you boil down to it, and it's support for perhaps an extra state military group or something like that. If that's the issue the American government has for it, well, then they have no leg to stand on, because they've been supporting extra state military groups forever.
Literally.
We all know that that's not why this is happening. Support for Hamas, implicit or explicit, isn't why this is happening. It is a said means to an end.
Agreed.
100%.
Agreed.
Cool. That's the last comment. So I will drop
Wonderful.
out.
Thank you so much, Cog. Brilliant. It's been really, really great, actually. I feel like it's been obviously wonderful seeing Sam. I think it's been a while. Sam and I actually know each other. Let me just put that out there. So we've known each other, but we haven't seen each other in years. So the fact that Sam was able to come on, I think, is amazing. And Sam, you've been incredible. So thank you so much. Thank you.
No, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it, honestly.
No, thank you. So I think that's all we have time for. I really, really want to thank our viewers, as ever, who tune in, who continue to engage, who comment. I know the regular faces that come in here, the regular names. I don't know faces, I know names. But I do want to thank you guys. And remember to like the stream. And if you're not a subscriber, then hit that button. I don't know what the next reasonable subscriber goal is now that we've hit 20k. Should we say 30? 30k? We'll go 30k. If you want us to grow, then you can head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There's a link to our Patreon where you can support us monthly or follow the other link to give us a one-time contribution. But I'm Sarah Dallal, and I'll see you on Friday with Curtis.
Support independent media, support social justice that's there on Turn Left.